Well, for the potential audience that we're going to have, my name is Bob Skillings, and of course, this is Denny Warta. And the reason we're doing this interview, Denny, and I thank you for indulging me.
It is my privilege
Yeah.
and pleasure.
Yep. So you might remember this. I moved back to New Ulm around 1990, and I rented some space from you for my
Yes.
computer business.
Yes,
And that's when we got to know each other. And I would honestly consider you one of my significant mentors in my life for the information you're always willing to share, and the stories that you have, and the experience that you have with our community, with our state, with our world. And it's always been very interesting to sit down and spend some time with you, and I thought that maybe we could do an interview and share it with others through NewCat. So thank you for.
well, it is
for
my,
this.
again, my privilege and pleasure.
Good. So I'm going to kind of start at the beginning of your life.
Okay.
So you're 96,
Yes,
going soon to be 97,
in
correct?
a couple months.
In a couple months. And I always look forward to the party that you throw for that birthday. I remember it started back when you turned 90, correct?
Yeah, right.
And I think several other community members enjoy coming to your birthday party that day as well. So anyway, you're amazing, and I hope it's many more years that you spend with us.
I'm having fun.
Good. So yeah, let's go back to your birth. I'm assuming that it was in New Ulm.
In New Ulm, then at Loretta Hospital.
At Loretta Hospital.
Right, in 1927.
1927.
Yeah.
And you lived on the north side of
North
New
side.
Ulm.
First at 715 North Jefferson, and then when my grandmother passed, we moved to her house at 600 North Jefferson.
And you had some siblings?
I have one brother,
One brother,
Norman.
who's passed,
Yes, he
correct?
passed 5 years ago.
Yeah, okay. So, and then you went to school in New Ulm?
Trinity, yes.
Okay,
12 years.
okay.
I had a long way to go, 2 blocks to walk.
2 blocks, all right. Okay. So, back in your youth, New Ulm, I'm assuming, was very different than it is today.
Totally different. Of course, there were no paved streets. There were very few cars. Deliveries were still made with horses. People were getting their weekly ice bags filled with ice from the ice company, delivered by horses. Every day, the milkman would come with bottles of milk on the front steps. So those were things you look forward to because it was fresh. The other thing is, at one time, I'm convinced that State Street area in New Ulm at one time was almost like an island between the river, which I believe split somewhere along the north end of town. North Garden did not exist. Far North Garden did not exist when I was a boy. It was a swampy slough full of peat, which occasionally would burn. They had peat fires out there. But anyway, that's where I learned to swim, below the hospital. That pond was there, and I lived a block and a half from there, and I learned to swim there.
So when you say that the river split, are you referring to the Minnesota River?
The Minnesota River, right, yeah. And so that created a higher ground, which is State Street, Washington Street, which, by the way, is almost all gravel, which would explain that too. And so there were high points from the riverbed, yeah. And of course, I suppose eons of erosion filled up that one area of the river and eliminated it as part of the river, unless it was in the springtime with high flood water. But
New Ulm is a what I would consider kind of a long community.
it is very long.
But back in your youth, It wasn't quite.
Matter of fact, 12 South was, uh, that was a pasture area, you know. Matter of fact, South Park and so on, that's where people would bring their, Walla High area. That's where the people would take their horses, and other animals to graze, because it was grassy. At the north end, the same thing. Fairgrounds was the far north end of town.
And that's like 12th North.
12, yeah. That was the far north end of town. So, yeah, it's expanded both north and south. Couldn't go further northeast because of the river. And going up on top of the hill, that was an obstacle, going up a hill. So the hillside development, the hilltop development didn't happen until later.
And you had mentioned something at one time about where we the residents took their garbage.
Well, yes.
Was that close to town?
Yes, matter of fact, I would say it's the 20th, near 18th to 20th South Valley Street. Was a city, so-called city dump. And people would take their unburnable garbage there and deposit it, as did our industries. Two of the industries in Rome at that time processed the poultry, Stork Brothers and Cudahy, and the daily accumulation of feathers and trails would be deposited there. And they were actually out in the open, yeah. But on the far southeast end of town. And of course, the prevailing winds would prevent any odor from coming over the town.
And you mentioned that there weren't many cars at that time, so probably the main transportation was our trains.
Well, I think that's one of the contributing factors to our success, is that we were at the crossroads of two main train lines in Minnesota. The east-west one was the Chicago Northwestern, and they had a depot here, and that serviced our people here with passenger trains going east and west. And then the other railroad company was in Minneapolis and St. Louis, Emmons and L it was called, and that traveled from Minneapolis to St. Louis. And so then they had their own depot. So people would travel any long distance by rail until probably in the 40s. It was still very common to ride, 40s and 50s. Still common to use the railroad. Go to Milwaukee or to Minneapolis, yeah.
And so, you were, I guess maybe a college student in those years. So I'm sure you took the trains, maybe.
Yes, I took the train when I enlisted in the Navy to go to Great Lakes. I took the train. So.
And so you mentioned military. So that was after high school?
After high school, yes. I graduated at 17, so I wasn't drafted until I was 18, but I enlisted in the Navy. I spent 2 years. Wonderful, exciting, interesting years in the Navy.
And that was right after World War II?
Right after World War II, right.
Okay.
I was still considered a World War II veteran because we were still chasing submarines. So,
and that was what you were involved with?
Yeah, right. We were stationed in Guantanamo Bay, Cuba. I was on an aircraft carrier, and we chased, we knew there were German U-boats in action yet after the war.
Interesting.
They likely were the ones who were responsible for carting some of the Nazis to South America. They used Spain as the point of exploitation. Franco was a friend of the Nazis, of course. He was put in power by the Nazis, Franco of Spain. And so many of the Nazis escaped Europe, Germany, and went to Spain. got on a submarine and went to South America. Our carrier didn't find any, but our sister carrier did. So kind of interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So getting back to New Ulm and the trains and transportation and being the crossroads, we early on, we had some significant industries here, especially down in the Goosetown area, the mills there.
We had one time 5 mills. And at one time we had the largest rye mill in the country. But at one time Minnesota was the milling capital of the world, with Minneapolis and Brown County. Brown County almost rivaled Minneapolis with the mills that we had here and in Sleepy Eye and Springfield. But back then, grains were the common crop. Wheat, rye, barley. But as row crop possibility came to be, and tractors came in the 30s, row crops were more profitable, corn and soybeans, and so the crops changed, and the grains are grown in the less fertile soil up north in the Dakotas and in Canada. And so today, there is no more wheat grown in Minnesota, and so there are no more mills in Minnesota. And we used to be the milling capital, and the milling capital today is Buffalo, New York. They ship the grain from Canada and the Dakotas to Superior, to Duluth, and by boat go to Buffalo. And Buffalo processes into flour.
In looking at your resume, so to speak, your biography that you provided, you mentioned that some of your early employment after college was related to the dairy industry, and you know that was a significant industry around here as well, correct?
Well, I was so privileged to be able to be involved in the very founding of AMPI. As an employee of the state bank at that time, I was offered the opportunity to do the bookkeeping, if you will, for the Farmers Co-op Creamery, which at that time was at the corner of 3rd North and Broadway, where the apartment building now is. So anyway, after my work at the bank, at 3:15 thereabouts, I would make 3 stops. They had a dairy store downtown. I would pick up the books, items there. I would go to the creamery and pick up the necessary data there, including all the farmers who brought their milk in, and then down to Center Street, where they had a milk drying plant. During World War II, the milk drying plant in New Ulm was a vital asset for our military. They provided dry milk for the world, and it came out of New Ulm. But anyway, Ada Whelan was the general manager of the milk drying plant at that time. But anyway, I would take those records home, and my dear wife, my late dear wife, I set up an office for her at home, and she did all of the accounting, check writing, and everything for the creamery, including all the farmers who brought in the cream. It was not milk, it was just cream that they would bring in. And all the employees, and we had 3 milk routes in town. So she did all of that at home, taking care of our 2 children. But anyway, in that process, it became so, it grew so fast, and then bulk milk hauling was another major change in that industry. Farmers were no longer separating the cream and the cream from the milk. They were hauling it all through the creamery. So different facilities and so on were necessary. It was a major change. And so that's when they opted to hire a full-time manager. And that happened to be, that happened in the 60s, early 60s. Carlisle Hansen was the very first one, and he was pretty much responsible for the success of that co-op has. and it is today AMPI.
And so it consolidated and grew
Yeah.
beyond.
All of the creameries existed in almost every township because the farmers couldn't haul their cream much further than a few miles. And so every township had a creamery. They would make butter. But once bulk milk came in, a bulk hauling of milk came in, the cream was not separated. And so the creameries that were in these townships went out of business. And matter of fact, they created another business in many areas, especially in Iowa. The farmers would acquire these big vats and grow fish in them.
Oh,
And then they would feed them soybean meal, and they would taste just like soybeans. The fish would.
and when was that? What years?
That was probably in the 70s, 80s.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
They found out that a fish, and for that matter, any animal, tastes exactly what it eats the last 10 days of its life. And so they had to remove the soybean meal the last 10 days before they were marketed.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
I'm going to back up a little bit. So we talked about your military service in the Navy. Was it after that that you and Dorothy got married?
Yes. We met at the canning factory at Sepia at that time, summertime between summertime vacations so called from the U. I worked up there in the pea pack and the corn pack, and so did she, and that's how we met, and that's where we met. Even though she was a South Ender and I was a North Ender.
Oh, okay. So she was from New Ulm.
Oh yeah.
But you both worked over there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Huh. And did you have your own car back then so you could drive to work?
I had a car, yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you got married, and that was what year?
50.
Okay. Just testing you a little bit.
Yeah.
So roughly you were about 23 years old then?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. And then you mentioned you have 2 children?
We have 2 children, yes. Dean and Diane.
Okay. And they both live here in New Ulm as well?
New Ulm, yes.
Okay. All right. And grandchildren?
I have 2 grandchildren. Rebecca, who has a child care business in New Ulm. And of course, Joseph, Joey they call him, is now a finance officer at the South Point.
Yeah, I know Joy. Back in the day when I had my computer business, and rented space from you, Joey was just a little lad, and he's so interested in the computers that I told him eventually, I'm going to hire you for my business, and I did. When he was in high school, he was an intern for me, and he's a great person, and it's a blessing that your family is close.
Yeah, we're still very close.
But in terms of distance as well, that your family is here in New Ulm, I think it speaks a lot to New Ulm in terms of the quality of our community and the attraction it has for our younger people.
And the opportunity here is incredible, and the lifestyle is an enviable place to live. Yeah.
And then, so your career went from working in, well, your educational background was in business and working with numbers, etc.
Yeah.
And that probably contributed to your working for the bank and working in the milk industry. But tell me about, for the most part, your lifetime career.
It was a water conditioning business, and again, this goes back to my work at the state bank. I was through working after 3 o'clock every afternoon, and one day, Vic Scotland, at that time, had the Lindsay soft water business in New Ulm, asked me if I would like to take a look at the possibility of selling water softeners. And at that time, water softening was a new industry. Nobody knew what that was. It was a matter of demonstrating it. in the home. And so I had the opportunity to do that, make appointments and show people how to soften this hard water, which New Ulm was infamous for. Uh, the, uh, the opportunity to do that presented an opportunity for a lot of success in the money end of it. And I eventually decided that this has to be my future. And so after 2 years at the bank, I left and bought that business.
The water business?
The water business, and I ran it for 41 years. And it was a great, exciting time for me and my employees. We had some great times and great successes. We actually process water for farmers as far away as Nebraska.
For farmers?
For farmers.
Okay, so not just a residential business.
No, we're industry, yeah. We were kind of groundbreaking in many areas of how water has to be more than wet. It has to be free of certain chemicals, or they can be a detriment in diets. And that was especially true when farmers were going from a few animals to many animals. Their shallow wells weren't adequate, and so they would go deeper and they would end up with water that oftentimes contained manganese and other elements that were not good for the animals they were trying to raise, especially cows and hogs. And so we were involved in removing those for livestock. It ended up being probably the major part of our business.
So Denny, downtown, what was the downtown like in the day? You know, I've seen pictures and it looks fantastic. You know, you see the old pictures of parades and that kind of thing. You know, what was that like?
Oh, downtown was totally different than it is today. Number one, all medical doctors, dentists, lawyers were all downtown on the second floor. Dr. Howard and Dr. Kaiser were above the then Woolworth store, the old Herber's building. Dr. Joe Vogel and Dr. O.J. Seifert were above the Oaks building, which is now part of the Franson Bank. Fritchie Clinic was above Green Clothing, which is now a corner building on the second on First North. The other block was Dr. Fazenmeyer and a Dr. Soffert. And there were drugstores. Every doctor had his own drugstore.
Huh.
Dr. Howard had Epley Brothers across the street from his office. This Dr. Seifert Vogel had a meeting drug. The Fritchies had Becker drug. Reliable drug was Dr. Soffert and Fazemeyer, and so and Olson drug. So the drugstores were all downtown. There was no clinic as such. That came about I believe, in the 70s.
Okay.
When they finally decided. But back then, doctors made house calls.
Yeah, and so that would explain that they're on the second floor, and if you couldn't get to the second floor,
Yeah.
they'd come to your house.
Exactly. Well, and there were no elevators at that
Right.
time.
Right.
But anyway, the other interesting thing I think is the taverns that we had. We had taverns all over town, by the way. The north end of town, the south end of Goosetown, they all had taverns within walking distance, and grocery stores. There were no supermarkets, grocery stores. Where I grew up, we had a grocery store across the street, Orange Grocery, and there were no supermarkets. There was no. You would just go buy the one thing that you needed or the two things. You didn't buy a whole basket full of stuff. So that's totally changed. But anyway, the taverns downtown, I was told, had a special every noon for these professionals who would come in for lunch. They would have free lunch if they had a nickel beer.
Huh.
a real bargain. I wish they would do that today.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting.
But anyway, the downtown, that's one of the things that, the downtown second floors now need to be investigated as to as a secondary use, because many of them are not accessible by elevator, and so are not used, not well used, perhaps is a better way to say it.
Yeah, okay. Huh. You had good experience and very involved as an entrepreneur, so to speak. And so I'm kind of transitioning from your being a business person here in the community to then getting involved in the creation of expansion of business and industry within the community. Can you say a few things about your being involved with, back then I think it was called New Ulm Industries?
Yes, well, back then, I loved hunting and fishing. That was my whatever free time I had was my love. And one of my dear friends was the late Henry Heine Sampson. We spent a lot of time fishing and hunting together, and
I think there's a slough on the west of New Ulm between Sleepy Eye and here. That's called the Sampsons.
Slough,
Yeah.
But anyway, he was very much involved, and he said, we want to do something for New Ulm, and we really should. At that time, there was already a threat that we were going to lose our mills. That flour milling was going to be a thing of the past. And so we visited with several other prominent business people in New Ulm, and we founded New Ulm Industries. And that is still going today. But anyway, through that we were lucky enough to acquire Kraft. Dr. Howard Vogel was very much involved in that. It's an interesting thing. Kraft is in New Ulm because of Dr. Howard. They were originally going to put their plant in middle of Mankato. And Dr. Howard knew some people with the Kraft company, and he says, that is not a good place to put a plant that makes cheese, because you may have odor problems.
Odor?
Odor, smell from
Okay, yep.
processing.
Yep.
And if you're in the middle of the town, you're going to be nothing but complaints. We have a site available in New Ulm that is on the southeast side of the town, and the prevailing winds would take it away from town. And that's why Kraft is in New Ulm.
Really?
Where they're at.
Wow.
And today all Kraft cheese in the world is made at that plant.
Yeah, and I know many, friends and acquaintances that have worked at Kraft, had great careers there and were able to support their family and then have a good retirement. I mean, yes. How about 3M? Was there any involvement with 3M?
We had an interesting, one of the first projects our New Ulm Industries had was building a spec building, which is today the 3M building. But it was vacant for a while, and our first tenant was a Webster Chicago Corporation out of Chicago. They were at that time manufacturing wire recorders, which nobody even knows what they are anymore. But motor winding was the big thing. And so they would teach the ladies how to wind motors. And then if they were skilled at it, they would give the ladies the necessary items to go take home. And you can wind them at home when you have time. And then when you have several of them done, you bring them to us, and if they meet our specs, we'll pay you for them. If they don't meet our specs, you don't get paid. You talk about quality control. Mm-hmm. That is New Ulm's strength yet today.
Yeah, the motor business,
windings,
and
yes.
there's a corporation called Windings.
Yes, and when Webster Chicago left after about 3 years, John Oster came here for a year or two. Osterreicher out of Milwaukee. And when they left, the big building was vacant for a little bit, and that's when 3M was expanding with their Post-it notes and some of the other stuff. and they decided to expand into New Ulm. And they've been growing ever since. Matter of fact, at one time, all copy paper for 3M was made in New Ulm, the lower plant. Before, this copies that we have today required a special paper to put, and that was all made here.
Huh.
Yeah.
Huh. And once again, that industry has been so vital to
Yes,
our
yes.
community.
We've been so fortunate to have these here, but then even more fortunate, we've been dedicated workers force. Our workforce here is incredible.
And then you continued with, from New Ulm Industries, you continued to sort of have a pulse on our economic development here in New Ulm as our New Ulm economic developer for several years, correct?
I was doing that as a volunteer, pretty much.
Oh,
They would pay my expenses,
okay.
but the state of Minnesota actually paid me to attend a economic exhibition in Zurich, Switzerland. So, you know, because of my ability to speak German, it was a real asset. And so I made some contacts over there, and I think one of those is Firmenich today. So,
Firmenich,
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. They're a Swiss company. Yeah,
correct?
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
So I've been so fortunate and lucky, if you will, to have these opportunities to do those things. You know.
But you've, have the interest and the time and the relevant skills to do so many things in your life. It's just
And
really
I had
incredible.
a lot of fun.
Yeah, and we can't leave out the fun. You always have a good time at what you're doing.
Yes.
So you mentioned Switzerland, and you told me one time that you've traveled, to Europe many times.
22 times.
22 times you've been to Europe. I haven't been there yet. Next summer I'm going to go.
You bet. You'll enjoy it. It's a great place to visit. And matter of fact, I just learned here recently that Germany is so close to having absolutely no waste. They're close to 100% recycling. But see, they're more, the incentive there is much stronger because they don't have the excess space to store waste material. Well, we will be facing that sometime down the road as well. But we need to follow their lead and find out how they're doing some of the recycling. But I think it's a very necessary industry. To be able to recycle, make them reusable, if you will, and rather than bury them or burn them or whatever.
So why 22 times? I mean, what
Well,
What-
I had,
what-
I had
what took
relatives
you
over
there
and-
so many
and
times?
some of it was the water conditioning business.
it was?
I was very much involved with that, as a matter of fact, yes. Germany and Austria and France. I even learned a little bit of French. Yeah. But we had Lindsay dealers there, and since I could speak their language, I would show them how we were doing it, and that's how they were learning it.
But you also established some personal relationships with government officials and, over there.
Yes. Matter of fact, I got to be on a first name basis with several of the Oberburgermeisters and
Which was what, their mayors?
mayors. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
All right.
So
And so many Germans have visited New Ulm over the years, and so you've probably hosted some of them at one time or another.
well, we did, and there are a couple of gentlemen in New Ulm right now who came here the first time in 1984 as part of the German bands that came here for many years for Heritage Fest to entertain us. An interesting sideline there, and as to why that was possible. As a thank you to the United States government for the assistance that the German people were given at the end of World War II, Lend-Lease and other programs, they wanted to thank us. And so one of the things they did is they would pay for the airfare back and forth for bands to come to America. And they would be here for several weeks. The only condition was they had to be hosted here by cities and individuals. And so they would likely fly to St. Louis, a German city, and then come to New Ulm, and that's why they were here for Heritage Fest. That really, perhaps, is responsible for Heritage Fest, the bands that came here from Germany. And then from here they would go to Milwaukee and Chicago and Cincinnati and home. And they started doing that in the 70s, and I think it stopped sometime back, but that's why we don't have the same kind of Heritage Fest anymore, because the bands aren't coming here free anymore.
Ah, okay. Interesting. So you've been involved with our prominent statue here, Herman the German. Tell us a little bit about your involvement with Herman the German over the years.
Well, he was an interest of mine for a long, long time, and his importance in the world has never really been fully understood or known. For example, there would be no English language today or German language had he not been successful in his victory over Varus in the year 9, when Jesus was 9 years old. That's a long time ago.
Yes, no kidding.
But he was a German, and he clobbered Varus, General Varus, who, by the way, is the same person who was in the Holy Land area, so-called today, where Jesus was born. He was the Varus who crucified thousands of people who were Jewish because he was Roman, and they would not adore multiple gods.
The restoration of the base.
Well, the base was made with sandstone, which was the hardest rock that they were able to cut at that time. A better rock would have been granite, but they didn't have tools to cut granite back then. And so these rocks contain water, and after more than 100 years of freeze-thaw cycles, they weaken. And so there are areas that are under stress and will need to be replaced somewhere down the road. And so that's going to be very expensive. And that's why we've got a study underway to review how this can be done.
Yeah, and I hope that we find the sources of funding.
Well, that's why we need to increase the recognition and the value, the knowledge of the value of his significance, and the work of art that it is. It's a fantastic work of art.
It is. So you mentioned government, and so I'm going to transition into, you've been an elected Brown County Commissioner
8
and
years, yeah.
City Councilor. How about Brown County Commissioner? How is that job?
Very, very, very interesting. And during my time there, I was very much involved in the establishment of Lake Haskell County Park. And that's just a wonderful asset for our area today. The dredging that was done there even made it a good fishing lake today.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so yes, I'm very, very proud to be having been involved in that acquisition and development.
And then also, were you involved in the sort of the beginnings of combining the county and city law enforcement? Or was that Brown County Commissioner, or was that City Council member?
I think that really had to do more with building than anything, you know. The sheriff's office was part of the jail, and when that building had to be removed and a new addition built, there was an opportunity. The city hall was getting too crowded to have the police department there. And so we looked at the possibility of expanding the county law enforcement center to accommodate the New Ulm police.
Hmm.
So that's why I did it together.
Okay.
It has to do with the city hall becoming overcrowded.
Okay. Okay. So, other involvements that you've had in our community have been long-term and significant. You've been a member of the Rotary,
40-some years,
40-some years. Wow.
you know, involved in the, Sid Gustafson and I, the late Sid was a attorney, a prominent attorney in Rome here, and he used to sit near me at Rotary meetings, and we were wondering how we had this. The city already had this great program every year to honor the athletes, and you know, he said we really should be honoring intelligence, you know, scholars, and so we founded the scholarship program, and it's still going today. I was MC at the very first one at Turner Hall. And so, you know, it's going yet today, and it's very necessary.
Oh, yeah.
You know, and it's just another way to recognize the importance and to thank those who are dedicated enough to work on that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So,
And I think I have talked with you a little bit about your being involved with expansion of our golf course. Speaking of fun,
you know, that
although
was-
I don't know if that's always fun. Depends how you hit them, right?
But we had an opportunity. There were four of us. We had an opportunity to acquire a parcel of land when the city airport, which used to be right up there, was too small and too. It wasn't flexible enough to take on larger planes. So they moved the airport from that area where it's now the front line to its present site. And so we acquired that land and developed it, and that is now the streets up there and part of the golf course. And then about that same time, farmland that was available there was acquired, and so we made it possible for the New Ulm Country Club to expand to 18 holes.
And that's a nice amenity that we have in our community as well.
No question, that's a gorgeous course, and people come here from all over, especially Metro area for New Ulm Open and so on, and they admire its complications, and that's a good part of golf.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, the beauty of it, it's really quite something.
Mm-hmm.
Becomes a real challenge.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Another community involvement that you've had was maybe found. I don't know if you were you a founder of New Ulm Area Foundation?
That was another one of Heine Thompson's hopes that we could develop a foundation strictly for New Ulm, and he donated the very first $100,000 to start it. And I was involved as the director of that and administrator of that for many years. Yeah.
Which today they still. I mean, it's grown
It's
significantly,
growing, and it's a wonderful place for people to donate their money if they love New Ulm, and it will be here to help them,
mm-hmm.
to help New Ulm people down the road.
Mm-hmm. I also noticed that you were involved in the Brown County Historical Society at one time.
Way back when we acquired the old post office building, yeah, that was quite an important step. The space. One of the things about a museum, people donate invaluable relics to them, and there have to be space to put them. And at that time, they were in the old library building basement, and they just simply outgrew it, you know. And I think it's a problem even today with the post office building. So they've already acquired part of the old Reslov Motor Company building, and someday hopefully can expand that even.
And so it's a beautiful building, and it started out as a post office. I don't. Do you remember when that arrived in New Ulm? I mean,
In the early 1900s.
okay,
It's,
before you were born.
oh yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
and then it became
And that they would, that the federal government would allocate funds to build something as unique as that. I mean, as a post office, it's really quite something.
I think New Ulm, we have a lot of infrastructure in our community, but we've always made it a priority in our construction to build something that lasts and has sort of a relation to how our community, historically is. Would you say that's a philosophy you've been part of?
Well, I think it has to go back to the very founding. Can you imagine a gentleman who was one of the very first people that landed in the Minnesota River here, came up with a plan to lay out a town with streets as wide as this, and nobody even thought about cars but it's an incredible foresight to design a city in the 1850s with wide streets like this. When they came from Germany, where land is very sparse and valuable, that they would lay out this land so that you would have streets that are as wide as they are, so that you can accommodate modern vehicles. It's incredible. That didn't just happen. That was one man's idea, and it was adopted wisely.
And even with a good plan like that, New Ulm's had some significant setbacks, weather-wise, and the War of 1862.
Yeah, we had the very sad events of 1862 was the Native Americans, but then about 20 years later, we were all but wiped out by a tornado. They call it cyclone, but that's similar weather events. So by the rebuild, but anyway, it's an incredible. I have people coming here from all over, and they can't believe this town. It's an incredible thing.
And one thing that we boast about is our brewery.
Oh yeah, absolutely, and a fine beer. At one time, I was told there were 5 breweries in town. One of them was out on South Minnesota Street. But anyway, beer is a very important part of German life. Matter of fact, the reason they drank beer, they didn't trust the water. Wisely. But anyway.
In
yes,
Europe, not in New Ulm.
No, not New Ulm.
We just carried on the tradition, correct?
Turn it into beer. But anyway, yes, it's incredible the intent of these people to keep that tradition going, and the Martys are doing just a fantastic job with the Shell brand, and it's a real asset for the town.
And was one of your good friends involved with the brewery?
Yes, Warren, Schmaltz, they call them. Yeah, we did a lot of hunting and fishing together, and yeah.
And part of your, world travels, you mentioned that you've spent time in Canada. Was that for hunting and fishing purposes?
Yeah. We had very dear friends up there who allowed us to hunt their beautiful fields for geese, which meant you had to dig a pit to hide in. But then the law up there is that you have to close them every day when you're done hunting. And we got farmers there, several of them, said, no, you can leave them open until you're all done. We won't be doing any driving over them. And so we became very good friends with them, and it was quite something.
And so that might have been like an annual trip.
Oh, yes. Yeah. goose and duck hunting. And it almost always included smolts,
Okay,
Warren Marty.
okay. And you also did some of your hunting out at Swan Lake?
I had 3 different cabins out there at times. So the last one about 20 years ago, but anyway, it was a great, have something that close to New Ulm. But it became almost like a year-round place to have a cabin and host friends and be by the water. And yeah, it was.
And was the duck and goose hunting out at Swan Lake pretty good at one time?
It was fantastic. You know, matter of fact, that lake was a center for swans at one time. As a matter of fact, that's why it's called Swan Lake. And Canada geese. That was almost like a stopover place on your migration annually, north and south. No, it was a hot spot for wild game. In the 30s, Swan Lake was totally dry. Matter of fact, they were mining gravel in that area. That's why there are some areas of Swan Lake where it's quite deep, and that's because that's where the gravel was removed. But fortunately, the weather came back. Clear Lake in Brown County was totally vacant, totally dry as well. It was farmed, as a matter of fact.
So does Swan Lake just depend on rainfall?
Pretty much, it doesn't have any rivers or anything feeding it, you know, that are any size, creeks, you know. So it's on high ground, you know, and that's why it's so dependent on rain to keep its normal level.
So is there anything that you're involved with today in the community that we should know about? Or are you totally retired?
Well, I'm totally retired in a sense,
Okay,
but I still love attending meetings that concern Herman. I'm very concerned about the ongoing stability of that the structure. The statue is in excellent shape. It was totally redone. But the statue itself is standing on a kind of an iffy, how long will it last type base. And I'm concerned about that. And hope that we'll come up with it will not be a low-cost project. It will be we will need help from the state and the feds. But I think if we can elevate its meaning and significance, we will have no problem.
and that would be, how would we elevate its meaning?
Well, to let more people know that next to the Statue of Liberty is the most important copper statue in America.
So Denny, anything else you would like to add today?
Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to share this. I have lived an incredible life.
You have.
It's the wonderful people who have helped me and made it all possible. It's just something I was fortunate enough to be able to use and to treasure.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
I love the people in Ulm and the opportunities that they've given me.
Yeah, and the friends that you've made way beyond New Ulm
Yes,
over your lifetime.
incredible.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you very much.
Yep. Thank you, Denny.
Yeah, fine. Okay.